everyone. This is Mostly Casual Commander, where we do our best to keep our games of Commander fun without sacrificing our ability to win. I'm BK, and today I have a game of Commander for you. Before we begin, it'd be an awful lot to us here at Mostly Casual if you could subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and like the content you've been enjoying. So Kovacs won the die roll. He's playing Padeem, Council of Innovation. He's trying to play all sorts of artifact spells and keep them protected with his commander. He kept a 7-card hand with 2 islands, Solundi Vision, which is MDFC Solundi Isle. He also has Whir of Invention, Divination, Trophy Mage, and Renowned Weaponsmith. Second in the turn order is myself, BK. I'm playing Krenko, Mob Boss, a mono-red Goblin Tribal deck that's looking to go wide with all sorts of goblins and tokens. There's also a couple of combo finishers in the deck as well. I kept a 7-card hand with 2 mountains, Brash Taunter, Massive Raid, Warren Instigator, Skirk Prospector, and a Soul Ring. Up next in the turn order is J-Man, who is using Kenrith, the Return King. He has a Wooburg-colored deck that has all sorts of fun jankiness going on, and some alternate win conditions as well. He kept a 7-card hand with Command Tower, Rogren Triome, Bountiful Promenade, Happily Ever After, Dam, Assassin's Trophy, and Path to Exile. And lastly, we have Busterkins, who's playing Ghired, Conclave Exile, a Naya commander looking to generate tokens and beat down his opponents. He kept a 6-card hand with Grey Pelt Refuge, Gargoyle Castle, Cultivate, Selesnya Eulogist, Druid's Deliverance, Dragonmaster Outcast, and had to put Giant Adaphage on the bottom of his library due to his mulligan. We choose our seats at random. Here we have Kovacs top right, BK bottom right, J-Man bottom left, and Busterkins top left. We hope you enjoy the game. After you watch the video, please feel free to leave some comments and let us know what you think. And on to the game. Kovacs kicks us off by playing Island and passing it over to BK. I play a Mountain for turn, and then I tap that to play turn 1 Soul Ring. Classic commander. On to J-Man's turn, he draws, and then he drops Rogren Triome as his land. Over to Busterkins, he plays Grey Pelt Refuge, and gains 1 life before passing the turn to Kovacs. Second island hits the battlefield, followed by a Renowned Weaponsmith. This is a monodork specific to casting artifacts or activating their abilities, and you could search for some specific artifacts as well. I play turn 2 Krenko and become very happy and very targeted by all of my opponents. I pass to J-Man, who plays Zagath Triome as his land for turn, passing it over to Busterkins. He plays Gargoyle Castle, which is a land that can turn into a gargoyle. And on to turn 3 with Kovacs playing an island as his land for turn, following that up with Trophy Mage, allowing him to go tutor up an artifact with mana value 3 and then put it into his hand. It'll be Skyclave Relic in this case. In order to save some time, he moves to combat before finding it, dealing 1 point of damage to Busterkins and then passing the turn to BK. I cast Lightning Greaves on my turn, trying to ensure that I could keep Krenko and his buddies protected. Then I cast Warren Instigator, a goblin that can allow me to cheat in other goblins when I hit an opponent. I move to equip Lightning Greaves to him, but in response, J-Man ruins my dreams by playing Path to Exile on Warren Instigator. And so I respond to this by tapping Krenko, activating his ability, and producing 2 goblin tokens before Warren Instigator disappears into nothingness. So that resolves, and then I find my land and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Following that, I equip my fast boots onto my goblin token, and I smack J-Man because screw you, J-Man. And then in second main phase, I re-equip Krenko with the Lightning Greaves to make sure he's safe. Command Tower hits the battlefield on J-Man's turn, then he taps out to play a very fancy Cultivate. He'll find 2 basic lands and put a Plains into his hand and a Swamp onto the battlefield. On Busterkins' turn, he plays a Forest, and he plays a Cultivate. It's not nearly as fancy, but he'll find 2 basic lands as well, putting a Plains to his hand and a Mountain to the battlefield tapped. On Kovacs' turn, he plays an island and then drops a Skyclave Relic kicked. This will produce 2 additional tapped token copies of Skyclave Relic. And then he moves it over to me. I play a Mountain, and then follow that up with a Skirk Prospector, allowing me to sacrifice goblins and make red mana from their corpses. I follow that up with Brash Taunter, a 1/1 indestructible that really likes to box other creatures and then sling points of damage at his opponents. Hasty Taunter chips in 1 damage at Kovacs. I pass the turn to J-Man, who cast Overloaded Dam. Keeps killing my stuff. Plays a Swamp, and then passes it over to Busterkins. He drops his Plains onto the battlefield and casts his commander, Ghired, Conclave Exile. When he DBs, he brings along a 4/4 Trampley Rhino friend. Then he passes over to Kovacs, puts down another island. Gilded Lotus hits the battlefield, producing 3 more mana of any one color. And then he uses that to cast his commander, Padeem, Consul of Innovation. This grants his artifacts hexproof, and he'll likely be able to draw extra cards with his ability. I move to combat on my turn, swinging in Brash Taunter at Busterkins. He takes it, then Mind's Eye hits the battlefield on my side in an effort to draw some additional cards and catch back up. Triggers on J-Man's draw step, I pay 1 and draw an extra card myself. Bountiful Promenade hits the battlefield on J-Man's side. Then he casts Ignoble Hierarch, Jun's version of Noble Hierarch. Following that, he uses his life as a resource for Phyrexian mana off of Norn's Annex, so he drops to 35, and now he makes it harder for creatures to attack him. Sungrass Prairie enters the battlefield on Busterkin's side of the board, then he casts Rock Egg, a 0/3 defender that makes him a bird token when it dies. He casts Selesnya Eulogist, which can allow him to exile things from graveyards and then populate. He moves to combat, swinging his commander at Kovacs and his Rhino at BK. On the attack, he populates, having the other Rhino hit BK as well, dropping me down to 32. On Kovacs' upkeep, he triggers Padeem, drawing a card, and then draws for turn. Salundi Isle enters the battlefield as the MDFC side, and then he pays 3 mana to cast Divination, which this allows him to draw 2 cards. He follows that up by casting Bident of Thassa, an artifact that allows him to draw cards when he deals combat damage to a player, and can also make his opponent's creatures attack. He hits BK with Padeem, which triggers Bident, allowing him to draw. Then he casts Thran Temporal Gateway, allowing him to drop historic permanents from his hand for the low cost of 4 mana. Onto my turn, I play Goblin Pile Driver, pro blue goblin that gets thick swole when his buddies attack. And then Goblin Crater Maker can murder himself to deal 2 damage to a creature or destroy a colorless non-land permanent. On J-Man's draw step, it triggers Mind's Eye. I pay 1 to draw another card. And J-Man plays Terramorphic Expanse as his land for turn. Then he follows that up by casting his commander, Kenrith the Return King, which can give things haste, counters, gain life, draw cards, or put a thing from a graveyard onto the battlefield. He then cracks his Terramorphic Expanse, finding an island, before passing the turn to Busterkins. I pay 1 to Mind's Eye and draw, and then Busterkins plays Dragon Master Outcast, a 1-drop that can make him 5/5 scary dragon creature tokens. And then Norn's Annex gets sliced in twain. Busterkins wanted to ensure that everybody could openly attack J-Man whenever they want. Busterkins draws a card, and then he moves to combat. He triggers Ghired, making another Rhino that's tapped and attacking. I chump block one of the Rhinos with Brash Taunter, which allow me to sling 4 points of damage back over at Busterkins. Onto Kovacs' upkeep, he draws for Padeem, draws for turn, plays an island, and then he casts Foundry Inspector, which reduces the costs of all of his artifact spells by 1 generic mana. Then he casts Conduit of Ruin, a 6-drop 5/5 Eldrazi that will go and tutor him up Blightsteel Colossus, and put Blightsteel Colossus onto the top of his library. In order to save time, he passes the turn. I drop a Dwarven Mine, which gives me a 1/1 dwarf, which is not a goblin. After that, I pay a little bit extra for Krenko Mob Boss, given his commander tax. So he enters the battlefield, and with that I move the Fast Boots over to Krenko. There's no responses this time. So J-Man and I decide to work together because Blightsteel is scary. So he blows up Padeem with Assassin's Trophy. And with Padeem out of the way, I can use my Crater Maker to destroy the Thran Temporal Gateway, at least slowing down Blightsteel Colossus' appearance. Kovacs uses some disruption. As revenge, he activates Bident of Thassa against me. In response, I activate Krenko, making 4 goblins. This will prevent me from having to attack with Krenko. But I do attack with the rest of them. This pumps Pile Driver, +4/+0. Brash Taunter hits Kenrith, allowing me to basically Lava Axe an opponent. In this case, I hit Busterkins. Then J-Man takes 2, and Kovacs takes 5. On to J-Man's turn, he plays Sunpetal Grove as his land, and then he follows that up by casting one of his alternate win conditions, Happily Ever After. This not only gains each player 5 life and drawing a card, but it can win him the game if the conditions are met. So we all gain 5 and draw a card, and J-Man ships the turn to Busterkins. On his upkeep, he gets a dragon off of Dragon Master Outcast because he has 6 or more lands. Then he draws for turn, plays a Plains for turn, then he casts Mimic Vat, an artifact that imprints a non-token creature when it dies. Then you could pay 3 to make a token copy of the creature. He moves to combat, triggering his commander, making a new Rhino that's tapped and attacking, and he swings everything out at Kovacs, dealing a total of 16 points of damage. Kovacs blocks and kills Busterkin's commander, so Ghired gets imprinted underneath Mimic Vat. Then I make good on my deal with J-Man and blow up Thran Temporal Gateway with my Crater Maker. Kovacs plays Urza's Saga as his land for turn, which can be used to make colorless mana, a Karnstruct, or find an artifact. He then casts War of Invention, where X equals 6, hoping to find a juicy spell. However, Lapse of Certainty makes an appearance from J-Man's hand. Congrats, J-Man. This puts War of Invention back on top of Kovacs' library. He plays Efficient Construction as a follow-up. This will make him Thopters when he casts artifact spells. On to BK's turn, I drop a Mountain, and then I play Hobgoblin Bandit Lord. This not only pumps my Goblin team, but I could also sling some damage around with his ability. I activate Krenko, making 8 more Goblin tokens. And then once they enter the battlefield, I move my Lightning Greaves over to Hobgoblin Bandit Lord and activate him. And then I throw 9 points of damage over to Busterkins, dropping him down to 26. Boots go back on Krenko. I use Taunter to hit Kenrith and deal 5 more damage to Busterkins. Kenrith is activated on my end step to have J-Man gain 5 additional life. Onto his turn, he plays Moon Silver Key and then immediately sacks it in order to find an artifact with a mana ability, which is Chromatic Orrery. This can be used as a big old mana rock or draw cards. This goes to J-Man's hand. On J-Man's end step, Busterkin activates Selesnya Eulogist, exiling my Skirk Prospector and populating a dragon token. On his upkeep, he makes a whole nother dragon as well. Then he plays Naya Panorama as a land for turn. Then he activates Mimic Vat, making a token copy of Ghired, represented by the actual card here. When it ETBs, it makes a Rhino Buddy, and with that, he moves to combat, swinging at both J-Man and BK. On the attack trigger, he makes another dragon that's tapped and attacking. This deals 12 damage to J-Man, 17 to BK. Busterkins is swiftly becoming enemy number 1. On to Kovacs' turn, he recasts War of Invention, allowing him to fetch up a juicy artifact and put it on the battlefield. Forsaken Monument is the card he chose. This pumps his colorless team, gives him additional mana, and gains him life. He then makes a Karnstruct using Urza's Saga. So this gets +1/+1 for each artifact he controls. In this case, it'll be an 8/8. After that, he plays Coral Atoll, bouncing an island back to his hand. He moves the turn over to BK. I drop a mountain as my land for turn. Then I cast Volley Veteran. When this ETBs, it deals damage to a creature based on the amount of goblins I control. I nuke Dragon Master Outcast, because why not? Then I activate Krenko, making 17 fresh gobos. Then I move to combat with my Pile Driver, 12 goblins, and my freaking dwarf. Kovacs, being thoroughly terrified by said dwarf, decides to scoop it up. Following that, I devise a diabolical plan to make my brash taunter fight my goblin pile driver. This allows me to throw 25 points of damage at Busterkins, knocking him out of the game. Very sorry, Busterkins. Not being satisfied yet, I activate Hobgoblin Bandit Lord and throw 18 points of damage over at J-Man, dropping him to 13. With that, I can't do anything else, so I pass the turn. On my end step, he activates Kenrith and draws a card looking for an answer. On his turn, he plays Deserted Beach. It has very beautiful artwork, but it is not a board wipe. He then casts Chromatic Orrery, allowing him to have tons of mana or tons of card draw. He then casts Wandering Archaic, which taxes his opponent's instants or sorceries, otherwise he'll get a copy of them. That's it, so he passes the turn. I activate Krenko, making 34 more goblin tokens. And with that, I cast Massive Raid, an instant spell that I almost forget can be copied. So I quickly pay the 2 additional tax from Wandering Archaic, and then I deal a nice 69 damage to J-Man. This is of course enough to knock him out of the game, and I am humbly the winner. Thank you much to our playgroup. It was a blast and had a lot of fun. So what did y'all think of this game? I had tons of fun and I hope you enjoyed watching it. If you did, please make sure you like and subscribe, and as always, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.